Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where you improve your ability to make the wisest and most profitable decisions. Today, we'll talk about how to get negative bad information. It's actually surprisingly hard to get negative information because within a company, because often it does not trickle upward. Often it stays at the lowest levels. I'll give you a case study, I'll give you a story about how this happened. So I was giving this conference at a manufacturing association on avoiding business disasters for manufacturers. And there was a tall, thin man, probably in his 50s, who approached me. And he kind of looked pretty agitated. I was a little concerned, hoped he wasn't angry at something I said. So he came up to me, introduced himself as Mark, and he asked me to tell him more about one of the cognitive biases, dangerous judgment errors that I've been talking about. Now, if you've been following the Wise Decision Maker Show for a while, you know that cognitive biases are what cognitive neuroscientists and behavioral economists like myself call the dangerous judgment errors that are part of our brain's wiring due to our evolutionary heritage, due to the data processing capacities of the brain, cause us to make bad mistakes in business settings and in life and elsewhere. So, the cognitive bias that Mark was interested in was called the mum effect. M-U-M, mum, like quiet, mum. Refers to people at the lower levels of the organization not passing up information up, not passing negative information up the chain of command to do what's called, the shooting the messenger colloquially. You probably heard, don't shoot the messenger. So where people who actually give bad information, pass bad information on, are blamed for that information or punished for passing up that information. It's a very common problem in companies, happens a lot, and so it has its own name by now, mum effect. And of course it applies not only to companies, but to all sorts of interactions where humans are. You don't want to pass on information, it's the mum effect. I started giving some examples from my consulting and coaching how the mum effect harms companies, causes them damage, because that's what Mark seemed to want to know about. And he grew more and more agitated, more and more upset. So I was like, what's going on here? This is feeling kind of weird. Well, okay, so eventually he interrupted me and he shared his own story. He used to be the CEO of a company, it's a pretty successful manufacturing company, few hundred people, in the Midwest, and the company was doing pretty well until the Great Recession hit in 2008, and then things were kind of tough for a bit. But Mark thought that he was, as the CEO, pulling it through this rough patch until a couple of years later he was called by the chair of the board of directors and asked about some of the accounting discrepancies that have been occurring in the company. And Mark was very surprised. He's like, what accounting discrepancies? I have no idea what you're talking about. So apparently the board got some anonymous whistleblowing complaints about some accounting issues in the company. There were two members of the board who had some experience with accounting, and so they went to investigate along with Mark these accounting issues. They went to the CFO of the company, went to the accounting department, and they were discovered. I mean, they were shocked. Apparently, the CFO, along with a couple of other kind of head accounting personnel, the controller and so on, were using some of the same fraudulent accounting techniques that got Enron and WorldCom and others in trouble around the time of the previous recession in 2002, 2003. Now, it wasn't quite as bad as Enron, but it was some of the same principles. And they were using that to hide the negative situation of the company, the seriousness of the problem, of the losses from Mark and from the board and so on. It's a privately held company, so they were hiding it from the owners. It wasn't like a publicly held company, but still not something you should ever do. So that was a very serious issue, and after they understood what was going on, Mark fired the CFO, fired the accountants who were involved. But as they dug deeper, it turned out that the accounting shenanigans were actually not limited to the Great Recession. They happened in a quite a bit smaller level, but they happened before too. And so that they started investigating more about what's going on, and they found that accounting wasn't the only department where such issues were happening. So in operations, for manufacturing, for safety, there were some safety issues that occurred that were swept under the rug. In the customer service department, some of the negative customer service interactions, they weren't brought up to the attention and they weren't reported in the way they should have been. And as a result of a broader investigation, what the board of directors discovered, and Mark, to his chagrin, discovered, was that the problem was actually Mark. He was unfortunately behaving in such a way that people who were passing up positive information were rewarded. People who were passing up negative information were punished. So that was really bad. It encouraged complacent behavior, it encouraged hiding negative information in the company, kind of in the lower parts of the company, not passing it up the chain of command. As a result, of course, that it really hurts the company. Now, research shows that it's not only Mark, it's a very typical CEO trait, it's a very typical top leader trait that as any CEO goes higher in the ranks, so someone proceeds up the ranks, they get more and more cut off from the previous sources of information, from the bottom-up reports, and the people who surround them, unless they're very actively fighting. So the natural human thing, how naturally things occur, is that the people who surround them become the praisers. Everyone likes to be praised, right? It feels good, it feels comfortable, you like people who like you like people who praise you like people who give you good news. You don't like intuitively people who give you bad news. So unless you actively fight this very, very natural human tendency, you're going to get surrounded by sycophants, by people who just, kiss up to you, the brown nosers, ass kissers, and so on. Those are the people who will remain around you if you don't actively fight this trait. And very many CEOs don't. They just don't fight this trait. They don't realize that that's what's going on. They might think that they want the truth, but their behavior, their emotions, isn't actually conducive to learning the truth. So the board, ended up firing Mark, and I would say it wasn't an unfair thing to do because he was responsible as the CEO for setting the company culture, and the organization's performance clearly suffered, was really hurting. Good people were leaving the company because they don't want to be in such an atmosphere where telling the truth gets them punished. And the people who are staying were more of the people who just kept their heads down, passed up only good information. So the company failed to adjust to shifting market conditions even before the Great Recession. And it was in pretty serious trouble, much more serious than Mark was understanding when he thought he was taking the company for the rough patch. And again, this happens very often. There was a study by Leadership IQ of over 1,087 board members of boards of directors of 286 organizations that fired their CEO. So 286 organizations, 1,087 people, that's a lot. What they found was that one of the top 5 reasons, so over 23% of the of the CEOs were fired for denialism. Denialism, meaning denying negative reality, failing to face the facts. And of course, part of the failing to face the facts comes from creating a culture where the negative facts don't float to the top and where they're hidden at the bottom, whether it's about safety, whether it's about customer service, or whether it's about the basic numbers of the company, hidden through fraudulent accounting techniques. That's a serious, serious problem. And economic downswings often reveal this negative information and lead to the removal of leaders like Mark. So Mark was actually in a pretty tough spot after he was fired. He was in a grim state of mind. He actually fell into a depressive episode for a while. He slept most of the day, didn't want to eat, didn't work out. He stopped spending time with friends. He snapped at his wife and kids. It got to be pretty bad from his story. I mean, he was kind of tearing up when he was telling me this. It was hard to hear. It was a tough story. It was a tough time for Mark after he was fired. I mean, he realized that it was, to a large extent, his fault. And that was pretty bad. So finally, his family wisely staged an intervention, after he lost 40 pounds and whatever it was, the 5 months or so, I think, about so. They staged an intervention, they got him some professional help, he got him to a therapist, got him to a psychiatrist, started taking meds, and eventually he was able to address the depression that was taking serious hold. I mean, that's like 5 months of that sort of state. That's a rough time. So Mark, at the time that I met him, he was just recovering, and recovering not in the sense, I mean, he recovered already his mental health, but he was recovering from his job loss and his professional career. He was trying to recover his professional career. So he went to the conference, the one that was giving the keynote, both to tap his network to try to find a new job, after the 5 months that he was out. And, there was more than 5 months. It was by that time about 7 months, because 5 months he was in depressive state, about 2 months to start recovering to the state where he felt comfortable beginning to network. And so he also wanted to tap his network to try to get another job and to also try to figure out what was going on, what happened. And he wanted to hear my speech on cognitive biases, these dangerous judgment errors, to kind of understand more about what happened to him. I mean, he clearly made some bad judgment errors in his decision making. So he was really kind of upset when he found out how our brains screw us in professional decision making, even at the very top of the organization, in some ways more the top of the organization, because of what I mentioned before, being cut off from previous source of information, being surrounded naturally and intuitively. If you just go with your gut intuitions, what's comfortable for you, being surrounded by sycophants. And he felt confident that what happened with the manufacturing company he used to run, it wouldn't have occurred if he learned about the mum effect and other cognitive biases, because he would have been working against these natural gut intuitions that cause us to make these really bad decisions. So he thanked me for gaining this understanding and started learning much more actively about cognitive biases, these dangerous judgment errors. And he made sure that he used them in his next job. So he succeeded eventually in finding a new role. Within the next year, he found a role as the COO, it's not CEO, as the COO of a smaller manufacturing company than he used to be the CEO. It was something like 150 people. Eventually, he moved into the CEO position, and both as the COO and the CEO, he made sure to spread information about dangerous judgment errors, the cognitive biases throughout the company, as a part of helping his team, both continuing his own professional development in this and helping his team make sure that they don't make the dangerous judgment errors that are such a natural, intuitive part of who we are if we don't try to take deliberate steps to address these dangerous judgment errors. So Mark's story, I mean, I'm still in contact with Mark, and he sends me questions occasionally by email, and we chat by email, on the phone, whatever, on Zoom, video conference. And his story really stuck with me. I mean, every time I think about, hey, I'm having a tough time convincing business leaders of the importance, or business professionals or whatever, entrepreneurs, of the importance of dangerous judgment errors. People saying, oh, I go with my gut all the time. I remember Mark. I remember his story. I remember the terrible decisions we all make occasionally when we go with our gut reactions, because of the way our gut reactions are wired to intuitively surround us by sycophants and so many other problems. The mum effect is one of over 100 cognitive biases, over 100 of these dangerous judgment errors that really screw up our judgment in very, very important situations, especially as we grow in our careers and become top-level leaders where we're cut off from previous source of information. So Mark, reminds me of how high-flying careers can be easily brought down without people doing anything malignant or malicious. I mean, Mark did not know about the accounting fraud that was going on. He set up a culture. He unintentionally created a culture as the leader. He set the precedent, he set the culture, the norms that allowed it to happen. And so these cognitive biases, these dangerous judgment errors, can do the same thing to anyone. any leader, any follower, any professional, anyone, you can fall into them. And just like Mark fell into them without realizing it. And what you need to do, what Mark realized he needs to do, and what he's been working on in the new company that he's running, the manufacturing company, that's smaller, about 150 people or so, is to teach people there about these dangerous judgment errors, these cognitive biases, and make sure that they don't fall into them. And I hope that you take Mark's example. Don't fall into these dangerous judgment errors. Do the counterintuitive things. Don't go with what's comfortable. What's comfortable will often get us into huge trouble, as it got Mark into trouble, hearing praise and liking people who liked him and who liked the company. You want to do the hard thing, the counterintuitive thing, but the thing that will be most important and beneficial for the long-term success of your career and your company, by making sure to use effective decision-making strategies that address these dangerous judgment errors. All right. Check out the blog on this topic. It's linked in the show notes, as always, and there are some more blogs linked in the show notes. If you like this episode, please click like and leave your comments in the episode. Let us know what you think. Let me know what you think. Also, please review the show on whatever platform you're using to get the show. Leave a review. Love to know what you think about the show as a whole, not simply this episode. Please make sure to click follow, subscribe, whatever, on the platform where you're getting this show from. And I hope that you will also follow us on social media. All the social media is linked in the notes. To learn more about making the wisest and most profitable decisions, there's a great free resource called the Wise Decision Maker course. And it's an 8-module video-based module course. So 8 modules, videos, cool stuff. Please check it out, register for it at disasteravoidanceexperts.com/subscribe. Again, disasteravoidanceexperts.com/subscribe. It's also linked in the notes. If you would like to get more in-depth information, very specific takeaways, a lot of case studies, check out my book on this topic. Never go with your gut, how pioneering leaders make the best decisions and avoid business disasters. I hope to see you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. As always, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you.